welcome to episode 2 of A Veteran's Guide to Shadow Chernobyl. We've got a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with each other on the table, but that's about par for the course. So we're going to start with uniques. And unique weapons I'm not going to bother with because you can't repair them in the base game, and so you've only got them until they start jamming. And there's some that, as soon as you find, start jamming. And as far as armor goes, there's two healing. There's the healing barrel, then there's ghost suit, which you can pick up, and if you want, you can cash it in for a quest. The healing barrel is also part of a quest from Lukash, and in both cases they reward you with another suit. At least I think Lukash gives you another suit. It's either a suit or a rare artifact, I don't remember. And personally, I've never been able to make up my mind if the unique armors for later in the game are actually worth it. Fang's exoskeleton is worth it if you want to be a walking tank. It's got the good night vision. It is still just an exoskeleton, so it has incredible normal defenses, and you can upgrade it with the plus 30% artifacts to make it more anomaly resistant, or you can use stuff like Urchin Crystal over there to make it so that you don't need to worry about the low rad resistance. But all the early game ones you can find, I've never really thought were that great. I think it's the tourist suit that I don't remember how you get from Sidrovich. Increases your carry capacity by like a net gain of 5 or something. And if there's one of those that you really like, because I think there's a unique duty armor, I do not remember, but there might be a unique duty armor that has good night vision or improved stats. But the reason that the armors are, in my opinion, going to be more useful is because you can repair them. Like I showed in the last one, you can visit the scientists here, stock up on pellicle, and then pick your favorite armor, and as long as there's something around to use, you can have that armor for the rest of the game. Now, because of where the end game is and the radiation level in there, I've almost always just chosen a Seva suit or the big green ecologist suit, just for the rad resistance. And then I have the Urchin Crystal combo to make sure it stays down without me having to open my inventory too often. That being said, Strelok's AK is pretty good, especially for an AK in this game. You can take the usual AK attachments, and the increased rate of fire means even on the higher difficulties, you're probably going to take someone out fairly quickly. And if you use it more like a marksman rifle, kind of like how I treat this, where it's single shot, you can get headshots pretty consistently. As for stuff like the threaded Spaz 12, or Spaz 12, that one, I don't know if it's worth it. I only use shotguns for the buckshot to take care of mutants because I think, I have no evidence to back this up, I think shotguns are better against mutants if they're not, in the very least, I have something to just chew through durability and replace when I need to. So the threaded shotgun doesn't help me out at all because I'm not using it against people, so it's not firing slug or dart rounds. I usually end up just selling it. Father Deodore's shotgun, the one with the gravity artifact, is very useful, but I really don't know if I would prefer to have that over something I can just keep getting over and over again. I mean, for how long you can potentially make it last, it's pretty good. But eventually it's going to wear out on its own, and you can't repair it in the base game. So in a mod, which will probably reintroduce the repairing, I definitely say take it. But in the base game, I'd say stick with the normal version of the shotguns. And most rifles, for that matter. There's the unique L85s, one of them being the lightweight one, the other being, I think that one's modified for the barrel drift, but those, for the weight, you can get something that's just kind of empirically better. If you end up siding with duty, which I'm going to cover in this video, and I would actually advise against wholesale slaughtering freedom, even if you want to be buddies with duty. There's the sniper SIG 550, I think it's 550. And that's really useful, because normally you can't put a scope on, even though I think the description for the SUSAT says it can be put on that particular rifle, but it can't. Or no, it says it can be attached to anything with a pick-tinny rail, and apparently it doesn't have a pick-tinny rail, or at least not a visible one. As far as other uniques go, the sniper TRS, I wouldn't say to bother with at all. Cash it in with duty and get the basically Ventores that isn't a Ventores from Veronin, and use that basically until it breaks, or until you find a Ventores. Those are the only ones that stand out to me. If you can stage an accident with Baron, he's got a unique Groza that's fairly useful early on, but I have mixed results trying to stage the accident, because either he kills the wild dogs right near the bar, or he gets moved somewhere else, because I believe if he survives the wild dogs here, he heads down to this checkpoint where almost nothing happens, so you'd have to wage war against duty to be able to get that unique, and I don't think it's worth it, because there's enough guys there that the boars will just melt before they pose a threat to Baron or the checkpoint on its own. But that's all I've got for uniques. Most of the later game armors, yeah, weigh your options and make up your mind as to which one you want, because you can repair them. Weapons, If you really like one, I guess use it. Otherwise, I'd use them for maybe one or two story missions or excursions, just to use them up and then sell them and buy something you can get more of. But the next thing I'm going to talk about, we're going to go over to Dark Valley and weigh the options when it comes to the major factions. Because while I think it's theoretically possible to be friends with the bandits, I don't think it actually nets you anything useful. So yes, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of either choosing to wage war or choosing not to. Alright. So, factions are something that the first time I played the game I didn't have a strong opinion of. But they end up having ramifications when you get into Pripyat. First time I went through the game, I didn't talk to Voronin about Skull's team, and I wiped out Freedom, and that, in my opinion, it made getting around Pripyat itself really irritating, because I had to not only contend with Monolith and the anomalies, but I also had to wonder if there was going to be a firefight with Freedom. And the second time I played through, I went over, I talked to Voronin, and I discovered that you could become friends with both Freedom and Duty in addition to the ecologists, which I don't think there's any reason to not be friends with the ecologists. Though for me it frequently happens on accident. Just because they pay well. But with Duty and Freedom, if you look at what they have to offer, each side has things that you can consistently buy that are pretty good, and stuff that you can't buy anywhere else. Duty stays with the Warsaw Pact kit, so you can later on, once you've basically prepped for Red Forest, maybe become friends with them. You can buy the OC-14, and I think you can buy the ASVAL, but occasionally Barkeep will sell that too, so you don't have to be friends with them for that. I know Barkeep sells some high-end armor. Duty sells their own that's just painted in Duty colors. But I think they also sell the Dragunov. The Dragunov SVD. Which, if you can get ammunition for it, which has always been my big issue, is a pretty good choice. As long as you're not going in buildings and underground. Freedom, I think you can buy the SVU with the giant compensator on the front. But the thing there is most of Freedom stuff is Warsaw Pact, or not Warsaw Pact, Duty's Warsaw Pact is NATO. They have NATO stuff. I can't believe I got that backwards. Freedom has NATO stuff. And I frequently won't do a lot of business with Freedom. I'll be friends with them so I can buy their higher tier weapons. And then basically I'm only going to visit Skinflint when I can basically make sure that he's going to have either no change in money, or he has like 1 ruble more or something absurd like that, just because he's one of the only merchants, like actual merchant in the game that has limited money, which drives me nuts, but in a way it makes a degree of sense. I think I usually just buy weapons from them, sell them trash artifacts in return, or whatever weapon I was using. The benefit to some of Freedom stuff is their Wind of Freedom suit. While it's basically the Stalker suit, or the base duty armor, it's lighter, so you can carry more stuff to sell, which is important. On the other hand, unless you like NATO weaponry, there's not a whole lot that they sell that you can't get somewhere else. At least that I've run into. They have a very short list of stuff, and there's a lot of similarities between them and Duty. But in my opinion, it pays to be friends with both of them, or at least have both of them not hate you. Don't get mixed up in their little war, because it really doesn't concern you unless you want it to concern you. Don't sign on with either side, because it just makes your life better. You have access to both of their higher tier of equipment, and when you go to Pripyat, the only thing you have to worry about is, I think, military monolith and anomalies. You don't have to worry about the other faction getting mixed in, which is useful, because there were a couple times in my experience that, because my preferred armor doesn't have a lot of bullet protection, I would just get shredded from behind, because there was a Freedom expert with a G36 that just recognized me and said, "You get to die." But the benefits of being friends with both sides, even if you are really strongly aligned with one of the others, or with one side, the benefits outweigh the risks, at least in Shadow Chernobyl. In other games, I honestly say do whatever. They both have rewards for being friends versus joining, but there's very little reason to actually sign on to one of the factions unless you really want to. Though I think in Shadow of Chernobyl, for some strange reason, signing on with Freedom makes you the enemy of the ecologists. I may be misremembering, but it's a possibility. And the next thing that I want to talk about is something that in the base game annoys the ever-living shit out of me. But most of the mods that I've found for Shadow Chernobyl fix it, so that's always helpful. And that is weapon attachments. They're something that I think are incredibly valuable to the game, even if the attachment system doesn't make any sense. And I'll explain what I mean there in just a bit. We'll see you in the Army warehouses. Alright, so we're here almost in the dead center of the Army warehouses with the only attachment I had in my inventory, or in my stash. I apparently got rid of the rest of them because they don't work with the G36. Except that one. I think I held onto that because I had the SIG before I found a stash with the G36. And this is what I was talking about. The M203 says that it's a grenade launcher for the G36. Here's the G36. Drag and drop doesn't attach it. No option to attach it. It just doesn't work. The silencer is another thing like that that drives me insane, because it says it has a set of adapters for almost any caliber, except you can only put it on 2 or 3 rifles and I think most of the pistols, but I don't use pistols because they end up being extra weight and extra ammo that I end up never using. That being said, stuff like the M203 comes in very handy. All the attachments come in very handy if you can find something to stick it on. The suppressor makes long-range combat almost laughable at times, because you can be far enough away with a weapon that's very accurate. Like if I wanted to end Father Deodore, I could just crouch, fire, and if I was using armor piercing, I could definitely say he would just flop over. And you know, they'd realize that someone just died, but they seem to not always know how to triangulate off one shot. I know the mercenaries over here in the corner, I could just sit over here with either the Ventores or a suppressed rifle. I just pick them off and just not get shot at, because they'd be running around like chickens with their head cut off because they couldn't hear the gunshot or see the report, or not see the report, see the muzzle flash. But because of how few things you can put a suppressor on in the base game, it doesn't make it worth carrying around. The great thing with the M203 though is while it's fairly heavy on its own, the grenades only weigh, I think, 0.1, whereas each one of those is over half a kilo, which adds up. I'm willing to bet that that's taking up a fair bit of weight if I wanted to go stash hunting, or if I went into X16 or the Brain Scorcher. The grenades would be weighing me down a lot from picking up stuff like artifacts, which are, in my opinion, more valuable than carrying around a few hand grenades. But with the M203 and the I forgot what the abbreviation was, but the Koister grenade launcher for AKs, the grenades are so light you can carry a stack of them in, and as long as you don't accidentally blow yourself up on the terrain, which I have done more times than I'd care to admit, they've got empirically better range because they're launched, not thrown. They have good explosion and shrapnel radius, and they do enough damage that a lot of the mutants just get torn to pieces and anyone that's not wearing really good armor is just going to die outright. So while the launchers may be heavy, the actual grenades aren't. So you can weigh that one yourself if you'd rather just drop grenades down on people than keep using the hand grenades, but I'd rather just have the launcher attached and basically be mobile artillery. It also comes in handy against encounters like over here at the tower where there's the bloodsuckers. You can stand back over here by freedom and just kind of arc grenades into buildings, which comes in handy against the bloodsuckers. If you can find a cluster of snorks that will stay close enough together, that's a great way to get rid of them. And it also makes taking out pseudo-giants a little bit easier if you don't have, an RPG lying around. Because I think for the encounters with pseudo-giants, the only one where you're not guaranteed to have access to an RPG is the Pripyat Stadium, because there's a bunch of pseudo-giants up there. Because going to X-16, you can technically stop and pick up the launcher that Wolfhound's mercenaries uses to shoot down the scientist helicopter, and you can get 2 RPGs over by X-18? It is 18, right? Yeah, 18. And just stash one of them, or stash the rocket, or stash one of them and the rocket that comes with it. So, you have access to them, but for all the firepower it brings to the table, having an underbarrel grenade launcher is better. And scopes, if you've got a rifle, you can see my opinion of scopes. I'm using an integrated. I'm partial to scopes. But if you aren't partial to scopes, I would say find a rifle that you can attach one to, unless it clashes with one of your other preferred attachments. Because places like Dark Valley, Red Forest, here in the warehouses, and a little bit in Yantar, it's not a bad idea to attach it every so often and just kind of look around, see who's there. And it makes long-range engagements so much easier. Because I know in the early game in the cordon, I'm always firing in short bursts, and I'm not totally sure if I'm actually hitting what I'm aiming at, though eventually it dies, so I guess I am. Whereas as soon as I get a scope, I can just take them out. Usually before they even know I'm there, unless I'm playing on veteran, though sometimes even on veteran I can take them out before they know I'm there. And that's all I've got for this episode. So, I will see you guys next time.